Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chain, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reed.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show. Hi, everyone. In today's episode, we're going to be speaking with digital identity expert Paul Dietrich about building trust in an automated supply chain. Human beings can't possibly touch every moment of the supply chain. In order to be more efficient, agile, things need to be more digitized and automated, and we're seeing that in our supply chain world today. Up to this point, we've trusted brands and humans. How do you build trust in an automated and digitized environment? So Paul's going to be talking about verifiable credentials and other things, and how we can build trust, authentic trust, in an interoperable way with the help of standards. And make sure you listen through because we also talk about zero knowledge proofs and some interesting information around that. So enjoy the show. Well, Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Reed. Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you as well. And why don't we just jump right into this and tell us how you got into the world of digital identity and just maybe a little bit of your background, but how did you get to where you are today with digital identity?
Yeah, thanks, Reed. Really, there were two different paths that led me to digital identity. My background's really in wireless engineering as a technology person, and that led me to start RADA, which is a wireless design firm where we develop radio frequency identification. And so this RFID component of wireless led me to learnings on the supply chain and product identification and really the value of the GS1 system. And so that, of course, led me to identity. And secondly, more recently, I started a design firm building IoT products and combining that with machine learning. And that's seen a lot of growth in the supply chain, which again brings me back to the same thing. It brings me back to digital identity and this need for a global, unique, and secure identity for supply chain.
Which is so important. And you're speaking our language, which is amazing. I know you've spoken our language for a long time. When you're thinking about the supply chain, what challenges do you see, like as it becomes more digitized? So you have RFID, IoT, machine learning. Like what challenges do you see as all of this happens in a digital way versus like the old fashioned paper invoices and in phone calls and things like that?
Yeah, Liz, I definitely see changes. I think one of the goals of all this digital interaction that we're adding to the supply chain is really to save work for people. And so by design here, we're engineering these systems to have less human touch points. And so as humans, I think we're kind of taught and raised to understand how to build trust. We know how to establish trust in relationships. We know when trust breaks down in relationships. We know how to build trust, what kind of interactions are required, and then how to increase trust when we need it, or when we feel like maybe there's a violation. So as humans, we're taught to do that. But as we're removed from these transactions, we've got to make sure the digital systems are programmed to replace that trust. And really, they can't just replace it. They've got to find something that's more efficient than human interaction, because that's the goal of this technology, and also more trustworthy because you won't necessarily even have a human observer watching over them.
How do you build that trust with the folks that are having their worlds changed by moving from that manual process, that human touch point, to a more digitized world?
Yeah, I think that's evolving, really. I think that's something that we naturally take technology on that helps our lives, like cell phones, for example. And I think with that, we use that human trust in accepting these technologies. So I think it's going to be something similar where humans will start to see this technology emerging. There'll be experts learning about it. They'll be applying it in select use cases. And then as it gains its acceptance and people trust that technology, they'll start to use it more throughout the supply chain.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, and it's an evolution, right? It's not, everything's not happening overnight. It's not a forklift and we happen, to just shift to this. And, we kind of see it coming. I remember year 2000 where we had all the stuff that was like building for like 5 and 10 and 15 years. Like the computers aren't going to work. We're rolling over to 2000 and the clocks, and I just remember the panic, but it still takes a really long time.
Oh, yeah.
Even after it happened, some things still didn't get converted over, and, because we used to keep dates with just 2 digits instead of 4 digits. Paul, Liz and I always talk about, like, supply chains today are not linear. They're webs, right? I mean, it's interactions at different times for different reasons, and it's not, there's predictability and consistency, but then there's erratic things and, weather and just lots of different things that force it into being a web. How does the digital identification play in these cases? Is it better? Are there new challenges you found out, or how does it apply and help us?
Yeah, so I think it does apply. I think traditionally, like, supply chains are built up by linking together these one-on-one relationships. So you and I, as trading partners, form a relationship, we sign a contract, we make an agreement, we exchange whatever we need, whether paper, email, PDFs, digital, to trust each other in those relationships. And so with that kind of relationship, if you imagine 2 people doing that, like, we can get along with first names. Like, we don't really need to identify ourselves very clearly. And so that's the same with people and supply chain individual relationships. But as soon as you get a larger group of people that want to communicate, then these unique names and identities become really important for understanding the context of information. And so as people, when we get in a big group, is it Jim D or Jim P or like so-and-so, and eventually it's your birth date and social security number. Like, you really need to establish a digital identity the bigger these ecosystems grow. In supply chains, I think as you grow from these one-on-one individual relationships to multiple parties that are sharing information in data systems where they don't necessarily build those one-on-one relationships, then it's important to have kind of a globally unique identifier that can be trusted.
So this global unique identifier is actually helping us have trust adoption faster than the old way, where it was like, hey, Paul, I'm doing work with Jim. Do you know Jim from ABC company? And, that's how we built trust the manual way, right? Like, what are they like doing business? And now things are happening, like, automation is happening. And so you're saying that this will help us get there faster.
Well, I think it's a fundamental piece, Reed. So if you imagine on the human side, like, Jim said this, and even if I had a paper document that said Jim said this, but he signed it Jim, you're like, well, I wonder if this is the Jim from Acme who really has authority to sign that. And so even above the signature and the cryptography and all this technology that's getting applied, being able to identify that party globally uniquely. So if this document shows up in your lap without context, meaning without the context of a business relationship, you can still tell who it is.
Yeah. Excellent.
There's a great example of this that's kind of emerging. There's some new legal regulation called the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, DSCSA. And there's pilot systems in place starting to understand how to apply these regulations. And one of the rules there is, in this pharmaceutical supply chain, wholesalers need to request proof from the manufacturer of the saleability of a pharmaceutical return. Say someone orders too much, it comes back from the pharmacy to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler's like, well, these haven't even been open, they're good, I want to resell them to somebody else. They can't resell them under this new act without proving that those came from the authorized manufacturer. And so here you have the retailer return to a wholesaler, and the wholesaler wants to ship to another retailer. But all of a sudden, this wholesaler now needs to contact a manufacturer and then prove that they're authorized to contact that manufacturer, when this wholesaler and the manufacturer don't necessarily have a direct trading relationship. And so that not only involves like the wholesaler contacting that manufacturer, but kind of proving themselves who they're authorized to be. And that requires technology, but it also, as a fundamental level, requires a unique identifier so you know who you're talking to.
Right. That's a great example. And, a real problem. I love bringing in like the real world scenarios, right? Like, I'm selling to one retailer, we took too much. We're going to send you some back. We can't hold it. And instead of going all the way back, the wholesaler's like, let's just move it on to over here. But it's a pharmaceutical, right? And so, you need to reduce, issues in counterfeit and, other scenarios that could possibly, come up that I can't even think of.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears just a little bit. Obviously, you've mentioned and you're very familiar with the GS1 standards. And I just wanted to touch on, the large amount of suppliers in this supply chain. So many, and it continues to grow. Why is it important, though, for suppliers to have the global unique identity using the standards from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we can go to another example where if you look at kind of the UPC on the Wrigley's gum 50 years ago, and why did that appear? I think there's automation reasons. So one is a technology, we want to do things faster and better. But the other reason I think is because stores and markets before that were keeping their own private stock keeping units. So a new product would show up and I'd assign it a stock keeping unit. I'd register it in my point of sale system or whatever that was, tell my cashiers like number 5245 was this. And then they would type it in. All that had to happen before a product could be sold. And so as markets scaled, as products scaled, like that didn't work. And so the community came to us through GS1 and said, well, can you fix this? Can you create a global number system to fix this? And I think we're seeing the same thing happen now with the actual suppliers, not with the products, but with the suppliers. So with marketplaces, these large healthcare networks, the number of vendors and participants in your supply chain that has grown really large, and managing and onboarding, say, a new vendor within your marketplace can't be a complex and cumbersome process. And so you don't want to have to do the equivalent of typing in that 4-digit number into your system. You want something that can be onboarded much more seamlessly.
So Paul, on the consumer side, they're looking for more information. Sustainability is becoming a big criteria. Authenticity is a big criteria for them. How does this enable, data accuracy and verifiable credentials? Like, how's this impacting on the consumer side?
I think digital identity is changing there. And I think what we're doing now, fundamentally, where all this starts is consumers trust brands, meaning consumers have a trust for brands and they select brands that they trust. And it's a fundamental way they interact with products. And I think that's as important as ever. I don't think technology replaces that. But I think once now we have data that's kind of linking and proliferating through the internet, means it's not always easy to understand the attribution of that data. Like I have an image of a product. Did that come from a brand? Right. Or did this description come from a brand? And so there's existing tools that are new today, kind of a Web 2.0 tool like Verified by GS1 that gives folks in trading partners confidence that the basic product data and images are delivered by the brand owner. And I think that's kind of the trusted registry approach. And that's kind of a centralized approach where you have trusted authorities and you go to those authorities to get data. And that's going to continue to play a part in how you distribute trusted product data. But I think as these Web3 technologies, these more decentralized technologies evolve, we're going to see a transition where the trust can travel through the internet with the data, meaning data will be available from multiple sources that aren't necessarily trusted, but the data itself is going to be attributable back to the original, whether it's the brand owner or an organic certifier or a government lab or something like that. So I think the data is going to originate from trusted sources still, like the brand, travel through untrusted parties like the internet, and still be verifiable as genuine and attributable to the source when it arrives at a consumer.
Wow. You just so succinctly really, I almost want like our audience to just pause on that for a second, because I was taking it in. I'm like, okay, these are some words. And then I'm like, wait, he's so right. Because in the physical world we're used to, you said it clearly. We trust the brand. We come to trust this brand versus that brand. And it's based on time, how they react, what they do, and that takes a lot for companies to build a strong brand and trust over time and effort and money. And nowadays we see a lot of new products pop up and they're advertised in the older way or somewhat newer way, however you want to argue it, but like video and image and experience. But is it true authenticity? And did it come from, a third party or something else? And is it really the real thing? And, as we move forward into this ESG and sustainability aspects of having to check carbon footprints and other things, I really see this as being a way to help tremendously. Because a lot of times products move through a lot of folks before it gets to the consumer.
Right. And I think the data also may move through multiple folks, meaning you're through a marketplace, or you're through a marketplace that got something from another marketplace that got something from a wholesaler. And yet in the end, you want to see that image online. And it's not with a physical product, you saw it in the store, the real product when you grabbed it, but now you're seeing an image of it. And so you want to have as much trust in that image or whatever other data is available that you
Yeah.
did in the product. And to do that, how do you attribute that back to the brand or to whoever issued the fact, whether it's the logo that says organic or the fair
Right.
trade stamp or the carbon emissions? How do you attribute that back to a source that you trust when the data could come from anywhere?
Yeah, yeah, because we still see a lot of those posts out there, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or something else, where it's like, here's the image on the seller site and here's what I got. And they're really not close.
Yep, definitely. And I think the technology to do that is emerging called verifiable credentials. So that's a specific technology, and there's tons of pilots and already production systems deploying that in and around consumers in the supply chain to start to build that kind of trust that can travel with data.
Yeah.
I was just going to actually ask you. Apparently, this is my new favorite topic. So, Paul, I am not technical,
Okay.
but I was listening. We had a podcast a few weeks ago, and Carol Fowler from Transmute talked about verifiable credentials, and so this is coming up again. So, can you help us understand how do the computer systems utilize the verifiable credentials as trusted information? Like, can you make it so I can understand it?
Yeah, so I think a verifiable credential really is a container. It's like a transparent container you place around the data. And when you ship that data in that container, you can see in it, it's not encryption, it's not hiding the data. It just creates like the equivalent of a physical seal and a signature. So if you imagine an envelope that you've sealed up and signed across the envelope, so if someone tears it open, you know they've torn it open and changed it. That's what it's really like. So instead of using a physical seal and a human signature, it uses a digital seal and a digital signature so that computers can handle it. And so if you put your data in one of these containers, seal it up from the issuer, you can send it somewhere else, and anyone receives it, no matter how it got to them, can check that the seal's intact, that it hasn't been tampered with, and that the signature matches the signature of the issuer so that you know who created that container.
That's another great analogy. I love it. I love the simplicity of it. It's like, I keep trying to tell people the digital world's not much different than the physical world. We just do things a little bit differently, or we have new challenges because we have so many sensors that we're using. But the sensory in a digital world can do it. It might just do it differently, like
Right.
electric cars or self-driving cars. My parents were like, you even trust those things? And I'm like, yeah, I trust them because I don't have eyes in the back of my head and I get drowsy, and these cars have like 13 cameras on them. Now, can the computer have a blue screen and a malfunction? Sure. Can I have a heart attack and, or a seizure? Sure. So there's a lot of relativity, but I feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
Well, yeah, and I think, Reed, also the function of it, meaning to create this container that's tamper evident and signed, that you can see the data inside, but you can also see it hasn't been altered with. That's fundamentally is like a fairly simple concept because it parallels what we already do. And same with self-driving cars, like the concept that the car does the driving. That's easy to understand. How it does it, on the other hand, can get pretty complicated. Like, how do you create a digital signature where you can prove that it's attributable? How can you create a container that's transparent that you can see in, but then you can verify the data? So underneath, the technology can be quite sophisticated. But since I'm a wireless expert, when people ask me to describe how a cell phone works, I just say, well, you just talk in it and it goes. Like, that's all you need to know, right?
I love it.
Like, it doesn't matter how it works. The purpose is you just talk and it just goes to whoever you want it to go to.
Yeah. It's so funny because earlier today we were having some conversations and analogies, and the phone company came up, and it's like, no one cares what's between the two headsets. It's you pick up the headset and you talk, and then the phone company doesn't care what you're talking about. They just want you to use the minutes, and it could even be a fax machine over it or a computer modem over it. It's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one piece there to add to verifiable credentials that's a little more interesting than just the transparent container, there's one feature there where when you create a credential, you can issue it to a subject. So I can make a university degree credential read for you. I'm not authorized to be a university, but imagine I have one. I'm a university. I issue you a credential that says Reed Jackson has a degree. So that credential can now travel through the world and anyone can prove that Reed Jackson has a degree. And so that's the transparent container part. But there's another piece that's offered, which is called a presentation. And there's a way that you, Reed, can deliver that container to someone. And at the same time, you can prove that you're Reed Jackson. I mean, you can prove I am the subject of that container. And so it's not just saying that a degree exists for a Reed Jackson. It's saying, oh, and by the way, I'm that Reed Jackson. And you don't have to divulge your name. You don't have to divulge anything about you. You can just prove that that container is about you. And so this method of being able to make that proof does kind of extend beyond what, a normal sealed container would look like. And it has a lot of functionality. There's a lot of benefit that comes for computer systems.
And are you referring to like zero knowledge proofs here?
It can be zero knowledge or not. I think that's something different. But if I issue a credential to someone, to an identifier, that identifier comes with enough cryptographic material that you can prove that you own the identifier that's the subject of a credential. And whether that's done with zero knowledge or not is kind of a separate thing, meaning you may want to present that university degree credential to an employer and prove that you're the guy who has the degree in whatever it is, master's in business. Or you might want to prove to your loan company that you have an advanced degree and not tell them what that degree is. And so you could make a presentation in both of those cases. One is not zero knowledge. The other is zero knowledge.
Yeah. I've heard the example before of proving your age, which is like today, 9 times out of 10, we're providing our driver's license. But on your driver's license is a lot of other information you don't want to share, like your address. So it's like I can prove my age with that. Liz, there's a really cool video on YouTube of a professor, and I forget where he's from, but he does how to explain zero knowledge proofs to like elementary school, grammar school, middle school, high school, college, and computer, engineers. And it got a little bit more elaborate as it went along, but it was like really cool to kind of see the progression. It kind of helped me, simple-minded. It helped me.
That's awesome.
It might help. I thought
you can send me the link.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, Liz, and we can really see how that kind of technology could apply to supply chains. Meaning, I want to prove something that I held a product, that I was part of a supply chain, that I sent it to my upstream partner, but I'm a distributor, so I don't really want to divulge to the retailer and supplier like who my relationships are with. But now I can prove those kind of things in zero knowledge. And so provide a link to the consumer or to the retailer that, yes, this product went through an authorized path without divulging what that path was.
So go ahead, Liz.
I was going to say, that's a lot of the concern when we start talking about food traceability in the seafood space or what have you. So there sounds like there's a lot of, real life opportunities for this as we move forward. It's great.
Yeah, and that's where I was going too, was, this digital identity has already been progressing for many years now. But Paul, where do you see the world of digital identity evolving in the near and far future? Where do you see it going?
Well, I think this is something that really we're still filling a gap. So when the internet was built, it didn't really get built with the identity layer. Like you hear about HTTP and TCP and IP and all these internet components that went together to build the internet, but there's no layer for identity. And so as users, we've kind of witnessed this as it evolves, like usernames, passwords, cookies, two-factor, like we're constantly adding all these things in, but they don't really form a coherent layer to provide identity over the internet. And so what I see is like a strong momentum from the identity community to try to build that. And so make the identity layer a core component of the internet. And I think once we have standards around that, you're going to see growth in activity on the internet, just like we did when HTTP came out. Like no one knew what the internet was before HTTP. And so it's going to be similar. Like there's going to be a lot of new use cases that emerge. And those use cases won't just be users. I think there'll be a lot of business to business use cases also emerging once you see like a full-fledged identity layer kind of integrated into internet technology. And we're in the middle of that. We're not at the beginning, but we're not at the end.
Yeah. And I was at the beginning of the internet being built out, and I remember the AT&T commercial with Tom Selleck saying, and then we called it the internet highway, and he's like, you'll drive down the highway and you won't have to stop at the toll booth. And I lived in New Jersey, so toll booths were like everywhere, like you grew up with. And
Yep.
I was like, yeah, that would be awesome that and he was like, you'd have your own lane and this stuff. And it's so funny because, here we are now, like 30, 40 years later. And yeah, I walk into my house and my thermostat changes the temperature before I touch it because it knows I'm home. Right. And I have a couple of very cheap, minimal IoT devices where, the lights go on and off either based on knowing that I'm home because of my cell phone or because it's a certain time of day. And you talked about this, like the internet has identity for machines, but it didn't have identity for people. And then you talked about the passwords and then two-factor authentication. But it's even more than what you talked about before. It's like we've heard these stories and I'm so excited for them because it really reduces fraud in the future. But it's like, who had the mortgage? Who was actually on it? Is this your bank account, right? Is this your degree? And how can I validate that this is your degree and you attended, you took the test? And then Liz, to your point, it's food traceability, cold chain, pharmaceuticals. I really think that the future is just so bright. And, people talk about the doom and gloom in the world, and it's always going to be there. You can't have cold without hot and light without dark. But I really think things are getting better. There's always people that will do bad things. It's just part of human nature.
But I think that's
some really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of illustration of how far things have come. I think I have an equally one for how far we had to go. Is I had an identity theft on my bank account recently, and someone stole a bunch of money pretending digital theft, all that stuff. Anyway, part of my recovery from that was to go and change all my passwords on the internet.
Yeah,
all my usernames and passwords.
And I bet you think you got them all, but you probably haven't gotten them all because you don't even know how many you have out there.
But I probably spent 6 or 7 hours doing that. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't need this many digital identities on the internet. I just one good one. I don't need 100 bad ones. I need one good one. And I think that's the story of where I see things are going. Because right now we have 100 bad ones and we're kind of migrating towards where we're going to have maybe a few really good ones. Maybe me as my person at work, me as a consumer, maybe me as a dad. Maybe I'll have a few of them, but it's really consolidating that.
Cool.
So as we wrap up, Rita and I ask everybody 2 questions. All right. So I'm going to ask you the first one. What is your favorite technology that's out there right now?
Oh, can I give 2 answers, Liz?
Yeah.
Okay.
Give 2 answers.
So I'm going to say,
love it.
My wireless side, I'm still excited about RFID. I still see huge growth there. It's a fun technology for wireless because you're always deep into the application. And also on wireless UWB, which is ultra wideband, that's emerging as a very accurate indoor location and communication mechanism. And so I think that's going to transform indoor experiences, meaning the blue dot that we see in Google Maps is going to be everywhere now. It's going to be indoors. It's going to be outdoors. It's really going to transform things. So that's on the wireless side. On the supply chain side, I really think that IoT sensors combined with data analytics like AI and ML, I think this is something we're going to see built into supply chains more and more. And it's really exciting because it's going to give more data to the consumer. It's going to be fresher products. It's going to be cheaper. We're going to be more trusted. Everything about this is going to make our lives better.
Yeah. Well, my next question is something that blows your mind. Something that's just totally changed you. And I'm going to tell you both a quick story. Back in 1995, I was at Rutgers University and I was in my first job at Xerox Corporation. And one of the VPs and the CEO from Xerox flew in and we went to a presentation at Rutgers. And I was, a little entry-level sales guy, holding on to the coattails of everybody else and just happy to be along for the meeting. But there was the head scientist from the Park Palo Alto Research Center from Xerox presenting at Rutgers. And so this is 1995, and he's like talking about ubiquitous computing. And my head was just blown out the back. I'm like, I wrote the word down, and I was so nervous. And we walked out of there, and the vice president of worldwide sales was like, what's ubiquitous computing? I'm like, thank God it wasn't just me. The funny thing is here we are, it's 2022, and my kids know what that means. And we have it with IoT. And he gave the example of, we have a lab in the research center here in Palo Alto, California, where we wear these little tags, and when you walk into the room, it changed the lighting and it changed the temperature and it turns your computer on and all this stuff. And Liz, you may not know this, but Xerox actually invented email, the mouse, the touch screen, like lots of these things. And it was all done through the Park Center. But now you see it coming to fruition, like the AT&T commercial. It's like, these are table stakes now. And so, it's very interesting. So what's something that's blown your mind, Paul, either in the past or currently, or just, and it doesn't have to be related to supply chain either.
Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking of a case like maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago, like right before COVID. I was at a digital identity conference, and one of the guys there that I met and was talking to had one of these AR headsets, the Magic Leap AR headset. And at that point, it was like the very first generation. Developers were getting in it. And I put it on, and it was unreal. Like there were creatures wandering around the room, jumping off tables, like they knew where all the furniture was. I could hear what direction they were coming from. Like when they went under the couch, like they would make muffled noises and it would sound like they were gone. And it just blew my mind just how much you could do. And it was rudimentary technology at that point. And I think now we're probably in the second or third generation of these headsets. They're still kind of too big and expensive to wear around in everyday life because you got to strap stuff on. But we're starting to see adoption across use cases within industry. And I think it's just amazing to see like how seamlessly this augmented reality, like metaverse, can be integrated into the real world. It just blew my mind. I didn't think it was possible.
Yeah. And, Google Glass was out, and I think it was way ahead of its time, and it just didn't have the edge computing to help them out. Now, Apple eyeglasses are being, teased to us. People think that they may be coming out here soon. And I have seen the Magic Leap. That is really cool stuff. Well, Paul, we can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today and dropping some knowledge on us and really painting a picture and using some great examples of everyday stuff. I'm excited for what the future can bring. So thanks for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Reed. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's been really great. Thank you, Liz. It's always great to talk about this stuff because not everybody wants to hear it. So that was fantastic.
Well, we do. We definitely do. So
excellent.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Take care.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.